A 7-year-old girl named Lily Harper kneels on the hard floor, tears streaming down her face as she scrubs her stepmother's shoes and the polished tiles. Her small hands tremble, her sobs echoing in the silence, while Veronica, her elegant stepmother, watches with a cruel smile. Outside, on patrol, Officer Daniel Reeves walks with his loyal German shepherd, Rook. Suddenly the dog freezes, ears pricked, eyes locked on the mansion. Daniel senses something is wrong, and what he discovers inside will change everything. Before we begin, tell us in the comments, where are you watching from today? Don't forget to subscribe for more heart-touching stories like this, and may you have a blessed and beautiful day ahead. The late autumn wind swept through Willow Ridge, a small American town tucked between rolling hills and maple groves that had already shed most of their leaves. The air was sharp, tinged with wood smoke drifting from chimneys, and the evening sky stretched in a pale gray dome, heavy with the promise of early snow. The town streets were quiet, save for the occasional hum of a car passing down Main Street, its headlights cutting through the encroaching dusk. In this calm, almost picturesque place, silence could often disguise sorrow, and behind the white fences and glowing windows of grand homes, stories far darker than the weather brewed. Inside one of those homes, a girl named Lily Harper knelt on the polished floor of a cavernous kitchen. Lily was 7 years old, small for her age, with thin arms and legs that bore faint bruises from unseen causes. Her light brown hair, tangled and unkempt, fell across her pale face, but it could not hide the large hazel eyes that seemed always on the brink of tears. She had the kind of face that carried both innocence and fragility, the sort that made strangers want to smile at her in sympathy and then look away in discomfort, as though the weight of her sadness was too heavy to hold for long. Since her mother's passing 2 years earlier in a sudden car accident, Lily had lived under the roof of her father's new wife, Veronica. That loss had carved into her a quiet sorrow that never healed, and the girl's demeanor had become a mixture of compliance and longing for affection, for kindness, for someone to notice the silent aches she endured. Veronica Harper, the stepmother, lounged at the long oak dining table just a few feet away. Veronica was 34, tall and willowy, her frame draped in an emerald silk blouse and dark slacks that spoke of elegance and wealth. She was undeniably beautiful, with sharp cheekbones, auburn hair styled in sleek waves, and piercing green eyes that could turn warm in public but cold as steel in private. She had grown up in a household obsessed with appearances. Her mother, a socialite who taught her early that charm was a mask and cruelty, when hidden well, could be power. That upbringing had shaped her into a woman who could laugh lightly at neighborhood gatherings while hiding the contempt that coiled inside her like a serpent. To her neighbors, she was graceful, generous, and devoted to her husband and his little girl. But when the doors closed and no one was watching, Veronica revealed another face, hard, demanding, and cruel, especially toward Lily, whose presence she tolerated rather than embraced. "Faster, Lily," Veronica said, her voice low and cutting as she tapped her manicured nails against the wine glass in her hand. "The floor should shine enough for me to see my reflection." "Yes, ma'am," Lily whispered, scrubbing harder, though her hands trembled. Her knees pressed painfully into the cold tiles, but she didn't dare complain. She had learned that even a small sigh could provoke Veronica's wrath. Beyond the walls of the Harper house, just a few streets away, Officer Daniel Reeves guided his patrol car down Willow Ridge's quiet roads. Daniel was 38, tall and broad-shouldered, with storm-gray eyes that carried both vigilance and weariness. His face, rugged and shadowed by stubble, bore the lines of a man who had known both discipline and loss. A decorated police officer, Daniel had served the town faithfully for over 15 years. Yet behind the badge was a man still haunted by the crumbling of his own family. His ex-wife had left 3 years ago, taking their young daughter across the state. Though he visited when he could, the absence had carved deep regret into him. He carried that regret like an invisible weight, and his nights were often spent questioning whether he had failed more as a father than as a husband. Sitting beside him in the passenger seat was Rook, his German shepherd. Rook was 7 years old, a large, muscular dog with a thick black and silver coat, and amber eyes that gleamed with intelligence. His left ear bore a small scar, a reminder of an old encounter on duty when he had lunged at an armed suspect to protect Daniel. Loyal, disciplined, and deeply intuitive, Rook was not just a working canine, but Daniel's closest companion, a silent confidant in the lonely stretches of patrol. Where Daniel's life carried fractures and sorrow, Rook offered steadiness, his steady breath in the dark, his sharp alertness when danger loomed, and his quiet comfort when memories of his daughter gnawed at Daniel's conscience. The patrol car rolled to a stop at a red light, and Daniel glanced at the houses lining the street. Many of them were large, built in the prosperous years of Willow Ridge's expansion, but one in particular drew his gaze. The Harper residence, its windows glowing warmly against the dark, looked like any picture-perfect suburban home. Yet tonight, Daniel slowed as he thought he glimpsed a figure kneeling inside, a child's shadow moving across the floor. He frowned but dismissed it. Houses often distorted images through curtains and glass. Still, something unsettled him, and Rook's ears perked as if sensing his unease. Inside the Harper home, Lily's small hands had begun to blister from the rough rag. She bit her lip to stop herself from whimpering. "My arms are tired," she whispered, almost inaudibly, her voice trembling. Veronica set her wineglass down with a sharp clatter, the sound echoing like a warning. "Tired? At 7 years old? Do you think the world bends to weakness, Lily? Stop imagining you're some little princess." "You're not." Lily's head bowed lower, and tears spilled silently onto the rag. In her mind, she thought of her mother, gentle hands brushing her hair, a lullaby whispered in the dark. Those memories were fading now, fragments slipping like sand through her fingers, but they were all she had left to comfort her. The clock struck 7, the chimes ringing hollow through the vast house. Veronica rose gracefully, collected her glass, and left the child on the floor without a backward glance. The kitchen door swung shut, leaving Lily alone with her aching arms, the rag still pressed to the tiles. Elsewhere, Daniel parked his cruiser outside a diner for a quick coffee. Inside, he exchanged brief greetings with townsfolk, but his mind lingered on the faint sobbing sound he thought he'd caught when he passed the Harper home earlier. He shook it off, blaming exhaustion. But when he slid back into the driver's seat, Rook gave a low, uneasy growl. Daniel scratched behind his ear, murmuring, "What is it, boy?" "You feel something I don't?" The dog's amber eyes glinted in the dim streetlight, unblinking, as if urging Daniel to pay closer attention. That night, as Willow Ridge settled into silence and frost began to gather on the rooftops, 2 lives remained tethered by invisible threads. One of a weary officer haunted by regrets, the other of a child enduring cruelty behind closed doors. Neither yet knew that their paths were about to converge, and that within the stillness of the small town, storms far greater than the weather would soon break. The morning air in Willow Ridge carried the crisp bite of late autumn, the streets veiled in a thin mist that clung to rooftops and curled over the faded brick sidewalks. A few shopkeepers were unlocking their doors, sweeping fallen leaves from stoops, and the scent of fresh coffee drifted from the lone diner on Main Street. Officer Daniel Reeves leaned against his patrol car outside the station, cradling a steaming cup in his hands. His German shepherd, Rook, sat attentively at his side, amber eyes following each passerby with alert curiosity. The town looked calm, but Daniel couldn't shake the image of that shadowed figure kneeling inside the Harper house the night before. Rook gave a soft whine, as though reminding him not to dismiss instincts too quickly. The call came mid-morning, a noise complaint on Willow Ridge Avenue. Daniel drove the cruiser down familiar roads. Rook's ears pricked at the sound of the siren cutting briefly through the fog. The Harper residence stood at the end of the street, grand and immaculate, its lawn neatly trimmed, the windows polished to a shine. From outside, it was perfection. But Daniel had learned long ago that beauty could be a mask. He parked at the curb, clipped Rook's leash, and approached the door. It was opened by Veronica Harper, the stepmother. She stood poised in a fitted gray dress that accentuated her slender figure, her auburn hair pinned neatly back, her expression calm but surprised. "Officer Reeves," she said warmly, her green eyes sparkling as though lit for a stage. "What a pleasure. Is something wrong?" Her voice carried practiced hospitality, the kind that could charm a crowd and disarm suspicion. Daniel explained the complaint, his gaze wandering past her shoulder. Inside, the marble-tiled foyer gleamed under a crystal chandelier. At the far end of the hallway, he saw Lily clutching a rag, her small frame rigid as though bracing for impact. Her hazel eyes flickered toward him briefly, filled with something unspoken, pleading, fragile, and desperate. Then she quickly looked away. Noise complaint? Veronica laughed lightly, the sound sweet but hollow. Oh, we had the vacuum on earlier. I do like to keep things spotless. Perhaps the sound carried. But please, would you like to come in for a cup of tea? She tilted her head invitingly, her charm as polished as her home. Before Daniel could respond, Lily stumbled forward, the rag slipping from her hand. Sorry, she whispered, kneeling to grab it. In that brief moment, Daniel noticed faint purplish marks along her forearm, half hidden by the sleeve of her worn sweater. His chest tightened, but he said nothing. Without evidence, suspicion meant little. Rook gave a low growl, his body stiffening as he fixed his gaze on Veronica. The sound was quiet but steady, not of threat but of warning. Veronica's smile faltered for a fraction of a second, her hand tightening on the doorframe. "What a magnificent dog," she said quickly, her voice syrupy. "So protective. You must be very proud, Officer Reeves." Daniel nodded slowly, his storm-gray eyes shifting between her and Lily. "He has good instincts." His words hung in the air heavier than they sounded. As Daniel stepped back toward the porch, the doorbell chimed unexpectedly from behind him. A woman approached, carrying a brown paper bag of groceries. She was in her late 50s, short and sturdy, with salt and pepper hair tucked under a knitted cap, and kind but weary eyes. This was Margaret Collins, a neighbor who lived across the street. Margaret had spent most of her life in Willow Ridge, a widow who survived by tending her garden and occasionally baking pies for the church bazaar. She smiled at Daniel, then cast a curious glance past Veronica's shoulder at Lily. "Oh, Mrs. Harper," Margaret said, her voice warm but edged with a subtle firmness. "I brought those apples you asked for. For your baking." She handed over the bag, her eyes lingering just a little longer on the child. Margaret had known Lily's mother before the accident, had seen the joy that once radiated from the Harper home. Since then, she'd grown increasingly suspicious of Veronica's coldness. But, like many in town, she struggled to find proof strong enough to speak openly. "Thank you, Margaret," Veronica said sweetly, taking the bag with practiced grace. "Always so thoughtful." She gently pushed the door wider, as if to block Margaret's view of Lily. Daniel caught the exchange, his gaze narrowing slightly. Margaret gave him a brief, knowing look before shuffling back across the street. "Everything seems fine here," Veronica said smoothly, her smile back in place. "Thank you for stopping by, officer." Daniel hesitated, his eyes dropping once more to Lily. The girl stood motionless, her small shoulders tense, her hands clutching the rag as if it were a shield. Her lips parted slightly as though she wanted to speak, but no sound came. Daniel's throat tightened. "If there's ever any trouble, Lily," he said softly, "you know you can call the station, right?" Veronica's eyes flashed dangerously, though her smile remained intact. She placed a protective arm around Lily's shoulders. "Of course she knows, officer. She's perfectly safe here." Daniel gave a slow nod, but inside his chest, unease churned like storm clouds. Rook barked once, short and sharp, his amber eyes never leaving Veronica. Daniel tugged gently on the leash and turned back toward the cruiser. On the ride back, Daniel's thoughts tangled. His instincts screamed at him. Rook's behavior confirmed it, and Margaret's subtle glance weighed heavily. But, without evidence, all he had were impressions. He remembered the bruises on Lily's arm, the hollowness in her eyes, the way her voice trembled as if each word carried punishment. He gripped the wheel tighter, his jaw clenched. He had promised himself he would never fail another child. That night, as dusk painted Willow Ridge in shades of violet and orange, Daniel stopped by the diner for dinner. Margaret sat alone at a booth, stirring her tea absent-mindedly. He slid into the seat across from her, Rook settling at his feet. "You saw it too, didn't you?" Daniel asked quietly. Margaret's weary eyes lifted to his. "I've seen enough to know something isn't right. That little girl doesn't smile anymore, not since her mother died. And when I ask about her, Veronica brushes me off. Always an excuse, always too perfect." Daniel sighed, rubbing his temples. I can't accuse without proof. But if something's happening to that child... His voice trailed off. Margaret reached across the table, her roughened hands touching his lightly. Sometimes proof isn't just bruises, officer. Sometimes it's in the silence of a child who no longer knows how to ask for help. Daniel met her gaze, his gray eyes heavy with resolve. Outside, the neon lights flickered on, glowing against the fog. Rook lifted his head, watching the street, his body alert. The town seemed peaceful, but Daniel knew that inside one house, peace was only a mask. The night had settled over Willow Ridge in a hush, broken only by the occasional creak of tree branches in the wind. Frost sparkled across rooftops like powdered glass beneath the pale glow of the street lamps, and the main street stood nearly deserted, except for the late-shift waitress at the diner cleaning down counters. Officer Daniel Reeves guided his patrol car slowly past the quiet blocks, his German Shepherd Rook resting with head on paws in the passenger seat. The dog's amber eyes flickered open with each turn, scanning the dark as though searching for something unseen. Daniel had spent the evening restless. The words Margaret Collins spoke at the diner earlier still circled in his head. Proof wasn't always bruises, but silence. He gripped the steering wheel tighter as he replayed Lily's hazel eyes, the bruises barely hidden beneath her sleeve, the way her body seemed to shrink under Veronica's gaze. His instincts had saved lives before, yet here he hesitated, bound by the invisible chains of procedure and doubt. As the cruiser turned onto Willow Ridge Avenue, headlights swept across the Harper residence. Its tall windows glowed faintly, curtains drawn, a picture of domestic warmth for anyone passing by. But something about the house pressed on Daniel's chest, an unshakable weight. Rook shifted upright, ears pricked, a low rumble forming in his throat. Daniel slowed, parking just beyond the hedge, the engine idling softly. From inside the house came the faintest sound, muffled but distinct. A child's sob, choked and hurried, as though someone were trying to hide it. Daniel froze, his breath catching. He turned the key to cut the engine. The silence afterward was even heavier, until the sobbing threaded faintly through the cold air once more. Rook whined, pawing gently at the door, his body tense. Daniel leaned back against the seat, torn. He wanted to march up the steps, pound on the door, demand answers. But without a call, without cause beyond suspicion, what right did he have? He had seen good officers undone by overreach, their careers shattered, their reputations smeared as meddlers. Yet doing nothing felt like betrayal. He whispered almost to himself, "What am I supposed to do, boy?" Rook turned his head, eyes glowing gold in the faint light, the kind of look only a dog could give, a reminder of trust, loyalty, and instinct. A figure passed in the distance on the opposite sidewalk, bundled in a thick wool coat with a knit scarf pulled high over her face. It was Evelyn Green, a retired schoolteacher in her 60s, known for her strict posture and brisk walk. Her silver hair poked out from beneath her hat, and her sharp blue eyes missed little that happened in town. Evelyn had taught Daniel's daughter in kindergarten before his divorce and carried a reputation for being stern but fair, a woman who had dedicated her life to children after never having any of her own. Some whispered that the loss of her younger brother to neglect when she was a teenager had made her determined to protect the young, even if her methods sometimes seemed severe. She paused at the sight of the cruiser, her eyes narrowing slightly before softening in recognition. "Evening, Officer Reeves," she called in a voice roughened by years in the classroom. "Quiet night?" Daniel forced a small nod, lowering the window. "So far, Mrs. Green." Her gaze drifted toward the Harper house. "Strange hour for lights in the upstairs rooms," she remarked casually, though her tone carried something more, an awareness, perhaps even suspicion. Then she adjusted her scarf and continued down the street, her figure disappearing into the mist. Daniel leaned back, closing his eyes for a moment. The sobbing had faded, but its echo lingered inside his skull. He reached for the door handle, stopped, and clenched his fist. A voice in his head urged him, "Go inside, hold the child, ask if she is safe." Another, heavier, warned, "You'll lose your badge, and then what protection can you offer anyone?" Instead, he started the car again, guiding the cruiser away slowly. His reflection stared back from the windshield, hollow-eyed, lined with exhaustion. Rook pressed his head against Daniel's arm, a gesture of comfort, but it only deepened the ache. Back at his modest home, Daniel parked in the driveway of the 2-story brick house he had lived in alone for 3 years. The yard was plain, the porch light flickering, but inside it smelled faintly of pine and old books. Rook trotted inside, circling once before lying by the fireplace. Daniel poured himself a glass of water, sat heavily in the chair, and stared at the framed photograph on the mantel. It showed his daughter, Mia, then 4 years old, perched on his shoulders at a county fair. Her laugh had been caught mid-sparkle, her curls wild in the wind, and his own smile, rare in photos, had been wide and unguarded. That was before the divorce, before the slow unraveling of visits, before distance hardened into absence. His phone buzzed with a late message, a reminder about tomorrow's briefing at the station. He set it aside, rubbing his temples. Still, the memory of the sobs from the Harper house pressed against him. He found himself rising, pacing the room, Rook watching him silently. "Am I failing her already?" he muttered. "Failing them both?" The dog tilted his head, as if answering without words. At that very moment, across town in the Harper household, Lily lay curled beneath her thin blanket. The teddy bear her mother had given her on her last birthday sat, clutched tight in her arms. Her hazel eyes, wide and glistening, stared at the darkened ceiling. She had tried to cry softly so Veronica wouldn't hear, but some sounds could not be swallowed. She whispered into the bear's worn fur, "I just want Mommy back. I just want someone to hold me." Her words trembled like a prayer, fading into the cold night. And somewhere outside, though his car had driven away, Daniel still heard her echo in his mind. It followed him into his sleep, a whisper threaded into dreams he could not quiet, a voice reminding him that silence was not peace, and inaction was not safety. The following morning dawned bleak in Willow Ridge, the mist of the night lifting only slightly to reveal a pale sun, weakly filtering through low clouds. The streets glistened with frost, and children walked in clusters toward Willow Ridge Elementary, their laughter puffing into the air like tiny clouds. Among them was Lily Harper, trailing behind the others with her small backpack slung over one shoulder. Her hazel eyes, still swollen from the night's tears, carried the weary look of someone far older than her 7 years. Her sweater sleeves slipped back occasionally to reveal faint bruises on her forearms, which she tried to tug down again quickly. The school itself was a modest red brick building with wide windows and a playground dusted in frost. Inside, the hallways echoed with footsteps and chatter as students hung coats in cubbies. Mrs. Hannah Porter, Lily's homeroom teacher, greeted each child at the classroom door. Mrs. Porter was in her early 40s, a petite woman with sandy blonde hair usually tied in a low bun, and gentle blue eyes that softened when she spoke to children. She had been teaching for nearly 2 decades and carried herself with the calm patience of someone who had weathered many storms, both inside and outside the classroom. A widow for 5 years, she poured much of her heart into her students, often calling them "my little flock." Her sharp intuition made her attentive to changes in behavior, and she had already noticed Lily's growing quietness in recent months. "Good morning, Lily," Mrs. Porter said, crouching to her level with a warm smile. Lily managed a small nod, clutching the straps of her backpack tighter. The teacher's eyes flickered over the child's pale face and the slow shuffle of her feet. But she said nothing then, choosing instead to guide her gently toward her desk. The morning passed with lessons in reading and math, the sound of pencils scratching against paper. Lily tried to focus, but her head throbbed and her arms felt heavy. When lunchtime came, the children spilled into the cafeteria, their trays clattering with sandwiches and cartons of milk. Lily picked at her food, nibbling half-heartedly. Her stomach growled, but appetite had long ago been replaced by a dull ache. It was during recess that the collapse happened. The playground rang with laughter as children raced across the blacktop, chasing balls and jumping rope. Lily tried to join in, her small body darting after a group, but after only a few steps, she stumbled. Her vision blurred, her knees buckled, and she crumpled to the ground. The laughter turned into startled cries. Mrs. Porter rushed over, kneeling beside her. "Lily! Sweetheart, can you hear me?" The child's hazel eyes fluttered open briefly, then closed again. Panic spread across the playground as other teachers gathered. One of them, Mr. Kyle Ramirez, the gym teacher, quickly sprinted inside to call for medical help. Mr. Ramirez was a tall, athletic man in his 30s, with a shaved head and an easygoing nature that made him popular among students. Normally quick with a joke or a grin, his face now was etched with concern as he relayed the emergency. Within minutes, an ambulance arrived, siren wailing down the quiet suburban street. 2 paramedics leapt out. One, a stocky middle-aged man with a grizzled beard named Tom Grady. The other, a younger woman with sharp dark eyes and braided hair named Alicia Johnson. They worked efficiently, lifting Lily onto the stretcher, checking her vitals, speaking in clipped but calm tones. Mrs. Porter hovered anxiously, clutching Lily's small backpack to her chest. By the time the ambulance pulled away, Officer Daniel Reeves had received the dispatch call. His stomach sank when the name came over the radio. Lily Harper. He and Rook arrived at the hospital not long after, the German shepherd trotting beside him, as though sensing urgency. The sterile white corridors smelled of antiseptic and echoed with the squeak of nurses' shoes. Dr. Susan Keller, the attending physician, emerged from the exam room. She was in her late 40s, tall and lean, with streaks of silver in her dark hair and an air of calm authority that made her presence reassuring. She had a reputation in town for being thorough and compassionate, especially with children. Her brown eyes were serious as she approached Daniel, Mrs. Porter, and later Veronica, who swept into the hospital still dressed impeccably in a tailored coat. "She's stable for now," Dr. Keller explained, her voice steady. "But I want to be honest, Lily shows signs of malnutrition. She's underweight for her age, and I've noticed several old bruises, some healed but leaving marks. It raises concerns." Daniel felt his jaw clench, his storm-gray eyes darkening. Rook, sitting at his side, gave a low whine, picking up his partner's tension. Mrs. Porter pressed a hand to her mouth, her blue eyes wide with distress. Veronica, however, reacted differently. She gasped theatrically, pressing a manicured hand to her chest. "Malnutrition? Bruises? That's ridiculous. Lily is just clumsy. She falls often, don't you, dear?" She turned toward the exam room, her voice sugar-coated but edged with steel. "She bruises easily. And as for her weight, she's always been petite. Isn't that right, Doctor?" Dr. Keller's expression remained calm but firm. "Some bruises can be explained by falls, yes, but patterns matter. These are consistent with more than accidents. I need to keep her here overnight for observation." Veronica's lips tightened into a thin smile, her green eyes flashing. "Of course, Doctor. Whatever you think is best." Then she shifted, her gaze sweeping toward Daniel. "Officer Reeves, I trust you'll understand that children sometimes exaggerate. Lily misses her mother, and she has dramatic tendencies. She craves attention," Daniel said. Nothing, but his eyes burned into hers, sharp and unyielding. He could still hear the sobs from the night before, still see the pleading in Lily's eyes. He knew lies when he heard them. Back inside the exam room, Lily stirred weakly on the bed. She clutched her teddy bear close, her small fingers curling around its worn fabric. Mrs. Porter stood nearby, whispering softly, "You're safe, sweetheart. Just rest now." Daniel lingered at the doorway, Rook sitting faithfully at his side, the German shepherd's amber gaze fixed protectively on the child. The officer's chest tightened with resolve. Lies could mask truth for a while, but not forever. The silence in Willow Ridge was beginning to crack, and soon the truth would demand to be heard. The following evening, Willow Ridge was drenched in a steady drizzle, the rain streaking down lampposts and making the roads gleam like sheets of black glass. The town had tucked itself in early, windows glowing warmly against the gloom, while Daniel Reeves sat in a plastic chair just outside Lily Harper's hospital room. Rook lay at his feet, the German shepherd's head resting on his paws, ears flicking every time footsteps echoed down the sterile corridor. The muted hum of machines and distant intercom announcements made the atmosphere heavy, but it was the quiet inside the room that weighed most on Daniel's chest. Lily was asleep, her small body dwarfed by the hospital bed. She clutched her teddy bear against her chest as though it could shield her from every cruelty she had endured. Daniel's storm-gray eyes lingered on her frail figure, the bruises that still marred her arms, the hollow in her cheeks that spoke of hunger. He remembered his daughter Mia at that age, full of laughter and energy, her curls bouncing as she skipped around the house before the divorce pulled everything apart. The thought pierced him with regret. He had missed too many nights, too many moments. He told himself he would not make the same mistake with Lily. As the rain tapped against the hospital windows, a woman appeared at the end of the hallway. She walked slowly, her posture slightly stooped, but dignified, her steps careful. She wore a beige coat that had seen better days, its seams fraying at the cuffs, and her dark hair, streaked heavily with gray, was tied back neatly. Her face was weathered, lined by years of work and sorrow, but her brown eyes carried both warmth and exhaustion. This was Maria Sanchez, the Harper family's former housekeeper. Maria had lived most of her life in Willow Ridge, arriving decades earlier as a young immigrant seeking work. She had raised her own children while working in wealthier households, and though her back now ached and her hands were calloused, she carried herself with quiet resilience. Known for her kindness and straightforward nature, she had also endured her share of hardship. Her husband had died in an accident at the factory 10 years ago, leaving her to provide alone. That loss had left her fiercely protective of children, unwilling to watch another endure suffering if she could prevent it. Daniel looked up as she approached. "Maria," he said softly, rising to his feet, "I didn't expect you here." Her eyes filled with tears as she glanced into the room at Lily. "I couldn't stay away once I heard," she whispered, her accent gentle, her voice trembling. "That little girl, she's been carrying pain for months. I should have done more. I should have shouted until someone listened." Daniel gestured toward a chair, and she sat down heavily, wringing her hands. Rook sniffed her shoes briefly, then settled back, apparently approving of her presence. "Tell me," Daniel urged, his voice low but firm. "Tell me everything you know." Maria swallowed hard, her eyes never leaving the sleeping child. "After Emma died, Lily clung to me. She was only 5 then. I cooked for her, brushed her hair, tucked her in. She needed softness. But when Jeremy married Veronica, everything changed. At first, Veronica pretended, smiles, sweet words. But it was all for show. The moment Jeremy left the house, she turned sharp. She gave Lily chores no child should do. Scrubbing floors, washing laundry too heavy for her little arms. And when Lily cried, Veronica told her to be silent or face worse. Daniel's fists clenched at his sides. Maria's voice cracked as she went on. "I tried to shield her. I would slip her extra food or cover for her when she was too tired to finish tasks. But Veronica noticed. She accused me of spoiling Lily, said I made her weak. Then one morning, she dismissed me, said the family no longer needed help. But I knew the truth. She wanted no one to see tears spilled down her cheeks now, and she pressed a hand to her mouth. I left Officer Reeves, but I never stopped worrying. I prayed every night that someone would notice before it was too late." Daniel leaned forward, his eyes burning. "Why didn't you speak sooner?" Maria's shoulders sagged. "Fear? Veronica has friends in high places, and Jeremy was blinded by her charm. I thought no one would believe a housekeeper over a wife. But seeing Lily in this bed, covered in bruises, thin as a shadow," her voice broke. "It's my fault I didn't speak louder." Daniel shook his head firmly. "The fault is not yours. It belongs to Veronica. But thank you, Maria. You've given me what I needed, confirmation of what my instincts told me." At that moment, Lily stirred in her sleep. She whimpered softly, her small hand twitching. Daniel stepped closer, brushing a hand gently over her tangled hair. "You're safe now," he whispered, though the words felt more like a promise to himself than to her. Maria rose slowly, placing her hand on his arm. "Please, officer, don't let her suffer another day. She has no one else but you." Now Daniel looked into her tired eyes and nodded. "I won't fail her." Later that night, as Maria departed, Daniel walked Rook outside into the drizzle. The German shepherd shook rain from his coat, then pressed close to Daniel's leg as if sensing the turmoil inside him. Daniel tilted his face upward, letting the cold rain sting his skin. His thoughts returned to Mia. How many times had he chosen work over moments with her? How many times had he let her down by being absent? His divorce had left him questioning whether he deserved to call himself a good father. Now, Fate had handed him another chance. Not the same, never the same, but a chance nonetheless. A child in need, voiceless and afraid, and he, a man with the power to act. He tightened Rook's leash and whispered, "Not this time. I'll protect her no matter what it costs me." Rook barked once, sharp and resolute, as though sealing the vow. The rain continued to fall over Willow Ridge, washing the streets clean, but inside Daniel's chest, the weight of his decision felt like both a burden and a redemption. He knew the fight ahead would not be easy. Veronica would resist, the system would be slow, but he would not turn away again. For Lily's sake, and perhaps for his own soul, he had to see this through. The drizzle of the previous night had turned into a cold wind sweeping down Willow Ridge's streets, scattering brittle leaves across sidewalks and rattling shutters. Officer Daniel Reeves leaned on the railing of his small porch, coffee cooling in his hand as he stared at the quiet neighborhood. The sleepless night weighed heavy in his bones. He had stayed awake turning Maria's words over in his head, his decision to protect Lily firm as iron. Yet he knew that protecting her meant standing against forces more insidious than just one cruel woman. Inside the house, Rook padded across the hardwood floors, his thick black and silver fur catching the morning light. The German shepherd, 7 years old but still powerful and alert, pressed his nose against Daniel's leg as if to remind him he wasn't alone. Daniel scratched behind his scarred ear. "We've stepped into something dangerous, boy," he muttered. Rook's amber eyes gleamed with quiet resolve. By afternoon, the danger showed its face. Daniel had just left the station when a dark sedan eased up beside him at a stoplight. The passenger window rolled down, revealing Marcus Dwyer, Veronica's older brother. Marcus was in his early 40s, with a broad build, slicked-back blonde hair, and a smirk that didn't reach his pale blue eyes. He wore a leather jacket over a pressed shirt, trying to balance menace with charm. Rumor around town had long tied him to shady business, real estate deals that pushed out families, whispered connections to gambling operations. "Officer Reeves," Marcus called smoothly, his tone mocking the courtesy of the title. "Mind a word?" Daniel's grip tightened on the wheel. Rook growled low in the back seat, his hackles bristling. Marcus's smile widened as he leaned out the window. "You've been sticking your nose where it doesn't belong. My sister doesn't appreciate it, and neither do I." His voice dropped, laced with steel. "You want to keep your career intact, keep your dog happy, stop poking around the Harper household." The light turned green, and Daniel pulled forward without answering, but Marcus followed for a block before peeling away, his laughter echoing faintly. That night, Veronica hosted a gathering at the Harper mansion. The neighborhood ladies came dressed in pearls and furs, sipping wine under the chandelier's glow. Veronica glided among them in a scarlet dress, her green eyes flashing with false warmth. Marcus stood in the corner, watching with a predator's patience. Among the guests was Cheryl Donovan, a woman in her late 30s with dark hair cut sharply to her jaw and a sharp tongue to match. She was Veronica's closest friend, a woman who thrived on gossip and manipulation. Cheryl had once been passed over for a promotion at the bank, and the bitterness had left her eager to tear others down. She leaned toward Veronica, whispering, "You'd better handle that officer quickly. Small towns adore their children. If word spreads about Lily, your perfect mask will shatter." Veronica's lips curled in a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Don't worry, Marcus and I have a plan. Officer Reeves will learn what it costs to cross me." Meanwhile, Daniel sat at his desk at home, sifting through case files with no appetite for food. His phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. "Stay away from Lily." Or, "Accidents happen." A picture followed, his patrol car parked outside his house, snapped from across the street. His stomach turned cold. He glanced at Rook, who raised his head, ears pricked, as though he too sensed the unseen threat. Daniel set the phone down, breathing slowly. Fear coiled inside him, but so did determination. He had been warned before in his career by criminals who tried to intimidate him into silence. But this was different. This was a child's life. Later that evening, Daniel stopped by the hospital again. Lily was more awake now, her hazel eyes still shadowed by exhaustion. She looked small against the white sheets, clutching her teddy bear. He sat beside her, Rook lying at his feet, tail thumping softly when Lily reached down to stroke his fur. "You're safe," Daniel murmured, though he wasn't sure if he was convincing her or himself. Lily's voice was barely above a whisper. She says, if I tell, no one will believe me. Daniel's throat tightened. He wanted to promise her the world, but promises had to mean something. He squeezed her small hand gently. I believe you, Lily, and I won't let anyone hurt you again. When he left the hospital, a figure waited near the parking lot. Marcus leaned casually against a lamppost, a cigarette glowing between his fingers. The smoke curled upward into the cold night air. You've been warned, Marcus said, his smile gone now. His pale eyes were flat, cold. Keep pressing, and something bad might happen. To the girl, to you, maybe even to that dog of yours. Nobody wants that. Rook barked sharply, teeth bared, pulling against the leash. Daniel stepped closer, his storm-gray eyes narrowing. If you or your sister lay a hand on that child again, I'll bury you under every charge I can find. For a heartbeat, silence hung between them, thick and dangerous. Then Marcus chuckled, flicked the cigarette to the ground, and walked off into the shadows. Daniel stood still, Rook pressed tight to his side. He knew now that this wasn't only about cruelty hidden behind closed doors. It was about power, control, and intimidation. But he had faced storms before, and with Rook at his side, he was ready to face this one too. The storm rolled into Willowridge just after sunset, the kind that turned streets into rivers and rattled windows in their frames. Rain lashed against roofs, and the wind howled through the empty streets as if the town itself was warning of something terrible. Officer Daniel Reeves sat in his cruiser parked near the hospital, Rook stretched out in the back seat but restless, ears flicking with every gust. Daniel's instincts had been churning all day, a knot in his gut that no amount of coffee could ease. The threats from Marcus still echoed in his ears, but it wasn't until his radio crackled with a frantic call from the hospital that dread gripped him like a vice. The nurse's voice came through, trembling. Officer Reeves, the Harper girl, she's gone. Someone took her. Daniel's heart dropped. He threw the car into gear, siren cutting through the storm as he sped back toward the hospital. Rook whined, then barked sharply as though sensing the urgency. Inside the hospital, chaos reigned. The staff hurried through corridors, their shoes squeaking on the wet linoleum. Nurse Abigail Moore, a woman in her late 20s with curly auburn hair pulled back under a cap, explained through gasps that she had stepped out briefly to retrieve medicine. When she returned, Lily's bed was empty, the window slightly ajar. Abigail was young, earnest, and hard-working, known among colleagues for her tireless energy. But tonight, guilt was etched across her freckled face. I only left her for 2 minutes, she whispered, her blue eyes brimming with tears. 2 minutes. Daniel scanned the room. The curtains fluttered with the storm wind, raindrops spattering the sill. A muddy boot print marked the floor near the bed, big, heavy, likely Marcus's. He crouched, studying it, while Rook sniffed the air, growling low. Find her, boy, Daniel commanded softly. The German shepherd lowered his nose, circling, then pulled toward the window, straining against the leash. In the shadows outside, another figure lingered, a night security guard named Frank Delaney. Frank was in his 50s, broad-chested with a limp from an old construction accident. He was dependable, but weary, his uniform slightly frayed at the cuffs. His tired brown eyes darted nervously as he explained he'd seen a dark van idling near the rear lot just minutes earlier. Thought it was a delivery, he muttered, shame twisting his face. Didn't think... Daniel clapped his shoulder firmly. You saw what you saw. That matters. Within minutes, Daniel and Rook were back in the cruiser, splashing through the storm-slick streets. Rook pressed his nose against the window, his body taut with focus. The radio buzzed with updates, but nothing concrete. The town seemed swallowed by rain and shadows. In the back of a warehouse on the edge of Willowridge, Lily sat huddled on a wooden chair, wrists bound with rope. The place reeked of oil and damp wood. Her teddy bear had been thrown aside, lying in a puddle near the wall. She tried to be brave, but her hazel eyes brimmed with tears. Marcus loomed nearby, his broad form outlined by the dim yellow light of a hanging bulb. Your hero of a cop can't save you now, he sneered, pacing. Beside him stood Veronica, elegant even in the squalor of the warehouse, her red coat gleaming as rain dripped from its hem. Her green eyes were colder than ever as she crouched before Lily. If your father's friend cares about his badge, he'll back off. Otherwise, she trailed her finger along Lily's cheek, and the child flinched. Veronica smiled cruelly. Back in town, Daniel pulled up near the old rail yard. Rook whined urgently, pawing at the door. Daniel opened it, and the German shepherd leapt into the mud, nose to the ground. They followed the trail through puddles and weeds, the storm soaking them both. Daniel's flashlight cut through the dark, beams dancing across rusted fences and abandoned train cars. Suddenly, a shout pierced the rain. "Reeves!" It was Officer Robert Bobby Klein, a fellow cop in his early 30s with sandy hair plastered to his forehead by the storm. Bobby was tall and lanky, his brown eyes earnest and sometimes too trusting. He had grown up in Willow Ridge, the son of a mechanic, and had joined the force to protect the same streets where he once rode his bike as a boy. He jogged over, soaked to the skin. "Dispatch said you're on the Harper case." I saw a van heading toward the warehouse district. Daniel nodded curtly. "Then, that's where we're going." Together, with Rook leading, they pressed into the industrial outskirts. Lightning split the sky, illuminating broken windows and graffiti-stained walls. Rook barked sharply, tugging toward a corrugated metal building. Daniel signaled Bobby to circle wide, his own weapon drawn. The storm howled louder, rain hammering the roof like drum beats. Inside the warehouse, Marcus paced, muttering curses. Veronica stood near the door, arms crossed. "He'll come," she said softly. "Men like him always do. And when he does, we'll make sure he regrets it." Lily shivered, her lips moving in silent prayer. She remembered Daniel's words, "I believe you. I won't let anyone hurt you again." She clung to them, her fragile hope flickering like a candle against the darkness. Outside, Daniel crouched behind a stack of crates, Rook at his side, Bobby across the yard giving a signal. The German shepherd's amber eyes glowed in the flashlight's reflection, teeth bared silently. Daniel's pulse hammered, but his resolve was clear. This was no longer about suspicion or instinct. It was about saving a child before the night swallowed her whole. The storm raged on, drowning the town in rain as Daniel prepared to move. The storm hammered down with relentless force, thunder rolling across the horizon as lightning split the sky into jagged scars of white. The warehouse loomed ahead, its corrugated walls streaked with rust, windows broken like gaping wounds. Daniel Reeves crouched low behind a stack of soaked crates, water dripping from the brim of his jacket, his weapon steady in his hand. Beside him, Rook pressed against his leg, the German shepherd's black and silver fur slick with rain. Amber eyes locked on the building, as though he could already see what lay within. Across the yard, Officer Bobby Klein crouched behind a battered dumpster, his sandy hair plastered to his forehead, his lanky frame tense with adrenaline. He gave a nod across the rain, his lips forming silent words. "Ready when you are." Inside the warehouse, the air was damp, carrying the musty stench of oil and mold. Lily Harper sat bound to a chair in the center of the dimly lit room, her small frame trembling. The ropes cut into her wrists, and tears streaked down her pale cheeks, but her hazel eyes still held a fragile spark of belief. Her teddy bear lay discarded in a puddle nearby, its worn fur darkened by water. Marcus Dwyer paced impatiently, his heavy boots echoing across the concrete floor. He muttered curses, his broad frame looming, blonde hair damp with sweat. Veronica stood near the wall, her red coat draped elegantly despite the grime, her green eyes sharp as glass. She had exchanged her mask of civility for cold fury, her lips curled in disdain. "You think that officer will risk everything for her?" Marcus sneered, tossing his cigarette to the floor. "Men like him care more about their badges than some broken little girl." Veronica smirked faintly. "He'll come, and when he does, we'll make an example of him." Suddenly, a low growl reverberated through the building. Rook, creeping ahead with his nose close to the ground, emerged from the shadows, his fur bristling. His teeth flashed in the dim light as he fixed Marcus with a predator's gaze. "What the—" Marcus barely had time to react before Daniel's voice rang out, commanding and sharp. "Step away from the girl." The officer surged forward, weapon raised, rainwater dripping from his jacket onto the floor. His storm gray eyes blazed with fury as they locked onto Lily, then flicked to the captors. Bobby appeared from the opposite side, his own gun drawn, though his hands trembled slightly. For a heartbeat, silence pressed against the storm outside. Then chaos erupted. Marcus lunged toward Daniel, swinging a heavy metal pipe he had grabbed from a workbench. The officer ducked, the pipe glancing off a crate with a harsh clang. Rook sprang, his powerful body slamming into Marcus's side, knocking him backward. The man cursed, struggling against the dog's weight as sharp teeth snapped close to his arm. Veronica screamed, snatching up a shard of broken glass from the floor. She rushed toward Lily, fury etched across her face. "If I can't control you, no one will," she shrieked. But Bobby, despite his nerves, intercepted her. He grabbed her wrist, twisting hard enough to send the shard clattering to the ground. Veronica shrieked, thrashing, her once perfect composure collapsing into desperation. Daniel pressed forward, his boot kicking the pipe from Marcus's grip. He slammed the man against the wall, one hand pinning him, while the other pressed his weapon firmly to Marcus's chest. "You so much as breathe wrong, and you'll regret it," Daniel growled. Marcus spat to the side, defiance still in his pale blue eyes, but the fight had drained from his body under the combined force of officer and dog. In the chaos, Lily's sobs cut through the noise. "Officer Reeves!" she cried, her voice raw and broken. Daniel turned instantly, his heart clenching at the sight of her trembling form. He holstered his weapon and rushed to her side, pulling a knife from his belt to cut the ropes. Rook, panting heavily, stood guard with ears back and teeth bared, his body between Lily and the others. When the last rope fell away, Lily collapsed into Daniel's arms. Her small body shook violently, her face buried against his chest. "You came," she whispered, her voice trembling. "You're safe." Daniel tightened his arms around her, pressing his chin to the crown of her tangled hair. "You're safe now, Lily. No one will ever hurt you again." His voice cracked, but the words rang with the weight of a vow. Outside, red and blue lights flashed as backup arrived. Two more officers, Detective Laura Hayes and Sergeant Tim O'Connor, entered swiftly. Hayes was in her late 30s, tall and athletic, with cropped black hair and piercing hazel eyes. Known for her sharp instincts and no-nonsense manner, she was respected by her peers. O'Connor, in his 40s, broad-shouldered with a thick beard, was calm and deliberate, his steady presence often the anchor during crises. They quickly restrained Marcus and Veronica, cuffing them despite their furious protests. As they were let out, Veronica spat venomously at Daniel. "This isn't over. You'll regret crossing me." Her voice cracked with rage, but her eyes betrayed something else. Fear of the mask finally shattered. Daniel ignored her, his focus solely on Lily, who clung tighter to him. Rook nosed gently at her side, his amber eyes softening as he licked her small hand, offering comfort the only way he knew. Outside, the storm began to ease, the rain softening into mist as the sirens wailed into the night. Daniel carried Lily out of the warehouse, her arms looped tightly around his neck, her head resting against his shoulder. She whispered one word again, as though clinging to its truth. Safe. And for the first time in a long while, Daniel believed it. The storm of the warehouse night had passed, leaving Willow Ridge washed clean under a pale winter sun. Streets glittered with lingering puddles, and the chill air felt sharper, fresher, as though the town itself had taken a deep breath. At the courthouse on Main Street, Officer Daniel Reeves sat on a wooden bench, his storm-gray eyes fixed on the tall double doors ahead. Beside him, Lily Harper clutched her teddy bear, her hazel eyes wide with both fear and fragile hope. Rook sat loyally at her feet, the German shepherd's black and silver coat brushed until it gleamed, his amber gaze sweeping protectively over the crowded hall. The custody hearing had drawn more townsfolk than Daniel expected. Whispered sympathy for Lily had spread after the arrests, neighbors who once admired Veronica's poise now recoiling at the truth of her cruelty. The case had been entrusted to Judge Miriam Hollis, a woman in her early 60s with silver hair swept into a neat bun and steel-rimmed glasses that gave her an air of quiet authority. Judge Hollis was known for her fairness, shaped by years of balancing the scales of fractured families. Her own past included raising 3 children alone after her husband's sudden death, an experience that had left her both empathetic and unyielding when it came to protecting the vulnerable. When the gavel struck, silence filled the courtroom. Testimonies were read, evidence presented, Maria Sanchez's heartfelt words, Dr. Keller's medical reports, the police accounts from Daniel and Bobby Klein. Veronica sat pale and stiff. Her once vibrant beauty faded into bitterness, while Marcus glowered in chains. The judge's voice, steady and solemn, declared guardianship transferred. Officer Reeves, the court recognizes your petition. Effective immediately, Lily Harper will be placed in your custody. Lily gasped softly, turning to Daniel. He leaned close, whispering, "You're coming home with me." Her arms flew around his neck, and the teddy bear tumbled to the floor. Rook gave a low, pleased bark that echoed through the hushed courtroom, drawing a ripple of relieved smiles. Life in Daniel's modest brick house soon took on a new rhythm. The days were not instantly easy. Lily flinched at sudden noises, sometimes woke crying in the night. But there was light where once there had been only shadow. Daniel rearranged his spare bedroom, painting the walls a pale yellow with the help of his daughter Mia, who had come to visit more frequently. Mia Reeves was now 10 years old, with a cascade of curly brown hair and her father's storm-gray eyes softened by youth. She had been shy around Lily at first, uncertain of how to treat a girl only a little younger, but carrying so much pain. Yet Mia had her mother's warmth and her father's stubborn heart. She reached out slowly, offering to share books, inviting Lily to help braid her doll's hair. Before long, the two were inseparable, their laughter drifting down hallways that had long been silent. Rook adapted quickly to the change, his protective instincts expanding effortlessly to include Lily. He slept each night curled in the hallway between the two girls' rooms, his ears twitching at every creak, his amber eyes glowing softly in the dark. On weekends, the children draped garlands of daisies over his thick fur, and he tolerated it with regal patience, his tail thumping whenever their giggles filled the yard. Daniel found himself transformed by their presence. He traded late-night case files for family dinners, his evenings once filled with loneliness, now brimming with small stories told by excited voices. He rediscovered the patience he thought had been lost in the ruins of his marriage, listening attentively as Lily described her drawings or Mia explained her science projects. In return, he told them stories from his patrol days, not of violence, but of small kindnesses, of lost dogs reunited with owners, of neighbors helping neighbors in storms. One afternoon, the three of them visited Willow Ridge Park, the winter sun weak but golden. Lily ran across the frosted grass with Rook bounding beside her, her cheeks flushed with life. Mia chased after them, her curls flying, while Daniel watched from the bench, his heart swelling with a mixture of pride and humility. Maria Sanchez arrived carrying a small basket of cookies, her lined face lighting up at the sight of Lily's newfound joy. She had become part of their extended family now, the quiet grandmother figure Lily had been missing. "Officer Reeves," Maria said softly, placing the basket in his hands. "You kept your promise." "She's smiling again," Daniel nodded, his storm-gray eyes misting. "Not just me. We all did. Rook, Mia, you. She's not alone anymore." As the sun dipped behind the trees, Lily came bounding back, her teddy bear clutched in one hand, the other gripping Mia's fingers tightly. She climbed into Daniel's lap, pressing her face against his chest. "You're home," she whispered, as though testing the words. Daniel kissed the crown of her hair, his voice steady but tender. "Yes, Lily. You're home." Rook lay at their feet, his great head resting on his paws, watching over them with the calm certainty of a guardian who had found his purpose fulfilled. In that moment, the long shadows of sorrow seemed to lift from Willow Ridge. A child was safe, a family renewed, and an officer who once carried only regret now carried hope. For the first time in years, Daniel believed in the promise of tomorrow. In the end, Lily's story reminds us that even in the darkest nights, God can send a miracle through the hands of those who choose love and courage. Just as Officer Daniel and his faithful German shepherd Rook stood as her shield, we too are called each day to protect, to listen, and to care for those who cannot fight for themselves. In your own life, perhaps the miracle you are waiting for is already close, waiting for you to open your heart. If this story touched you, please share it with someone you love, leave a comment below, and subscribe to our channel for more stories of hope and redemption. May God bless you and your family with peace and strength. And if you believe in His miracles, type Amen in the comments.